At a friend's dinner party, I walked into the kitchen for more wine. My fiancé was against the counter with him behind her, fixing her dress. He said, "Act normal." When I took a step forward, I remember stepping into that dinner party already carrying a small knot in my stomach. Nothing dramatic, nothing alarming. Just the usual feeling I got whenever Camille insisted we attend something hosted by Landon. She always claimed she and Landon were like brother and sister because they grew up on the same block and shared a childhood full of scraped knees and backyard summers. I would nod along, pretend it was all simple history, and remind myself to relax. People have friends. Adults mingle. Not everything has danger hiding behind it. The evening felt normal at first. Landon's condo smelled like roasted rosemary chicken, the kind he bragged about perfecting after watching some cooking show. He greeted me with a slap on the back and asked about work while Camille handed Sloan a box of pastries we had brought. Everything moved smoothly, with the comfortable mix of chatter from the small group of friends already seated around the living room. I took my place beside Camille and watched her laugh at a joke Landon made about our shared college days. Nothing in her expression suggested anything unusual. She acted the same as she always did in social settings. Warm, bright, and slightly overeager to keep everyone entertained. The first hour passed quickly. Food hit the table. Wine flowed. The playlist blended into the background. Landon teased Camille for almost burning a steak at our last barbecue, and she shot back with a playful comment about his disastrous attempt at homemade pasta. I tried to ignore the fact that they exchanged familiar smiles a bit too often, but it wasn't enough to set off alarms. People who know each other for decades share old rhythms, and I told myself that was all it was. Near the end of the meal, I noticed the second bottle of wine was empty. Camille nudged my arm and said she wanted to bring something sweeter to the table. I stood to help her, but she waved me off, claiming she knew where Landon kept the good stuff. She disappeared into the kitchen, and the conversation continued without her. I stayed seated, listened to Sloan recount a chaotic day at her job, and tried to forget the knot in my stomach. A minute passed, then another, and eventually I followed her, mostly because I felt restless sitting still. There was nothing suspicious about grabbing another bottle, and I figured Camille was just deciding between options and lost track of time. The hallway to the kitchen was dim, with only one light turned on at the far end. I walked quietly, not intentionally sneaking, but not stomping either. The closer I got, the more I heard a faint rustle, the kind that doesn't come from searching shelves or moving bottles. It was a hushed, awkward, human kind of rustle. I slowed down without realizing it. When I crossed the threshold, everything inside me froze. Camille was pressed against the counter with her dress slightly lifted in the back. Landon stood close behind her, his hands near her waist, as if he had just stepped away, but not far enough to erase the intimate posture. Camille's hair fell over one shoulder, and her breathing looked all wrong for something innocent. Landon glanced over his shoulder and saw me standing there. His expression was a mixture of irritation and something that looked dangerously close to entitlement. Camille turned as well, but her face shifted too late, as if she needed a moment to decide whether to look guilty or surprised. She chose surprised, but the delay already told its own story. My body reacted faster than my mind. I took a single step forward because I felt the pressure in my chest snapping open like a blown fuse. Landon did not look afraid. Instead, he moved just enough to create space while keeping a hand lightly on Camille's arm. She straightened her dress too quickly, brushing down the fabric with frantic palms. I did not raise my voice. I did not move in a chaotic way. I stood there and told them I wanted an explanation immediately because the scene in front of me did not match anything Camille had ever told me about her relationship with Landon. Camille started talking fast, insisting she had spilled a small bit of wine on her dress and Landon had been helping her fix the zipper. She forced a laugh that sounded sharp enough to cut glass. Landon repeated the same story in a slower tone, as if he was annoyed that I interrupted something routine. He added that people who make assumptions end up embarrassing themselves, which only tightened every muscle in my back. I stepped farther into the room, and Landon lifted his hands in a calm, detached gesture. He looked at me like he expected me to swallow the story simply because he presented it with confidence. Camille kept adjusting her hair in the reflective surface of the microwave door, refusing to meet my eyes for more than a second at a time. I asked them again what exactly had been happening, because the posture I saw was not a posture someone uses to fix a zipper. Camille claimed she had leaned back to look for the corkscrew and lost her balance. Landon had caught her. Nothing else happened. Nothing was planned. Nothing was inappropriate. She talked faster with each sentence, as if speed could force truth into the words. I reached past them and opened the drawer where the corkscrew always sat. It was exactly where Landon had kept it for years. There was no reason for Camille to lean across the counter in the position I found her. Camille's face turned pale when she saw I had checked the drawer. Landon crossed his arms in a defensive stance, annoyed rather than apologetic. I felt something shift inside me, the kind of shift that permanently ruins trust even before facts become clear. I moved to the wine cabinet, grabbed a bottle, and told them we were going back to the table, but not before Camille and Landon understood that I noticed every detail of what I saw. Camille begged me not to cause a scene. Landon gave a dismissive laugh that sounded like he thought I was the unreasonable one. Before we could take a step, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out without thinking. The notification showed a short preview of an earlier message Camille had received. It was visible because we shared a small group calendar app, and her notifications sometimes popped up on my screen when she forgot to disable the sync. The preview showed the first line of a message from Landon. It read, "Make sure we get a minute alone before dinner. I have something to tell you." My throat tightened so hard I could barely swallow. Camille snatched the phone from my hand, insisting it was old, but the timestamp was from 2 hours earlier. I looked at them both. Camille's face filled with panic. Landon held a steady stare, but his jaw twitched just enough to expose the lie behind his calm posture. I walked toward the dining room without another word, gripping the bottle so hard the neck pressed into my palm. My mind raced ahead of my footsteps. I knew this night was about to turn into something none of us could walk back from. The only thing left was to see how far the truth went once everything unavoidable finally surfaced. The tempo of the evening had shifted. What began as a simple dinner among friends now felt like the first crack in a wall that had been quietly forming behind my back for longer than I wanted to imagine. And I could feel the collapse beginning. The moment I stepped back into the dining room with the wine bottle, the atmosphere shifted even though no one knew why yet. Conversations paused for a second, enough for people to sense something was wrong. I took my seat while Camille and Landon trailed behind me with shallow breaths and stiff shoulders. They both looked like they had rehearsed a story, but neither of them looked convinced it would work. Sloane studied them first. She had always been sharper than she let on. She watched the way Camille tucked her hair behind her ear 3 times in a row. She watched the way Landon's hand hovered near Camille's back, then retreated. She watched me set the wine bottle down without looking at either of them. Her eyes narrowed just enough to show she caught every detail. The table conversation attempted to restart, but it stumbled. Someone commented on the dessert waiting in the kitchen, and someone else asked about a new restaurant downtown, but no one maintained momentum. People sensed tension the same way animals sense a storm building in the distance. The air grew heavier with every passing second. I decided I was not going to pretend. I leaned back in my chair and told everyone I had just walked in on something suspicious. I did not raise my voice or create theatrics. I spoke evenly because silence carries farther than shouting, and everyone leaned toward it. Camille froze mid-reach for her glass of water. Landon stiffened like he wanted to object, but did not have enough distance from the truth to do it convincingly. The table went quiet. Every pair of eyes locked on us. Camille insisted that I was misinterpreting what I saw. She talked quickly at first, describing the zipper, the spill, the balance issue, the same details she had already tried feeding me. She sounded rehearsed to the point of fragility. Landon backed her up with a calm tone that felt forced. His jaw kept shifting, the same twitch I had noticed in the kitchen when he realized their messages had synced to my phone. I said the drawer had the corkscrew. Camille's face drained of color, and Landon shot me a cold look, as if I had broken some unspoken rule by revealing the inconsistency. He tried to downplay it, claiming people grab things in the wrong place all the time during parties. No one looked convinced. Sloane was the first to break the silence. She asked Camille why she had been gone so long if all she needed was wine. Her tone was neutral, but the tight grip she had on her own glass said she was bracing herself for something ugly. Camille attempted to steady her voice and claimed she had gotten distracted because her dress felt loose. She said Landon stepped in to help since he knew the place better than anyone. The explanation sounded vague enough to dissolve under its own weight. One of the guests shifted uncomfortably. Another looked down at their plate instead of contributing. Everyone understood something was happening between the three of us, and no one wanted to be the first to take sides. Landon finally spoke. He said everything was innocent and people should relax. He said things could look bad even when nothing inappropriate was happening. His tone held a trace of irritation, as if he considered himself above suspicion. The more he spoke, the more I recognized that he was defending his pride rather than calming anyone. I asked the question that everyone at the table had been thinking but was too polite to voice. I asked why he messaged Camille earlier asking for a moment alone before dinner. Camille inhaled sharply, and Landon turned toward me with a stare that tried to hide panic behind anger. He claimed the message was about a surprise. He said he had wanted to ask Camille's opinion about something he was planning for Sloane. He delivered the line with a confidence that cracked as soon as Sloane's expression changed. Sloane's shoulders stiffened, and her eyes locked on him. She asked him what kind of surprise required him to meet Camille privately. Landon tried to maintain the lie, but he stumbled on a detail about a gift idea he claimed Camille had helped him brainstorm. Camille stared at her lap, unable to contribute anything that would support his story. Sloane stood slowly, excusing herself from the table. She said she needed a moment to think, but she did not go to the bathroom. She walked directly to the hallway. I watched her disappear behind the corner, and a few seconds later, I heard the faint buzz of her phone unlocking. She stayed gone long enough for the silence at the table to deepen into something heavy and suffocating. When she returned, her face looked different. Not shocked, not angry, just resolved, as if something inside her had finally clicked into place. She sat beside me, not beside Landon. That alone told everyone something irreversible was coming. She turned to me and asked if she could talk privately. Landon objected immediately, but she ignored him. She told me it involved something she had held back because she did not know how to confirm it. The room quieted again, and I heard my heartbeat in my ears. We walked to the corner of the living room where the candles dimmed the light and muffled the noise from the table. She lowered her voice to a level only I could hear. She told me she had suspected Landon and Camille of hiding something for months. She said small details had bothered her, like Camille visiting Landon when she claimed she was running errands. She admitted she had even driven past his apartment once because she felt uneasy. That was when she saw Camille leaving his building late in the evening. My stomach tightened, and I leaned back against the wall because my legs suddenly felt unstable. Sloane did not dramatize anything. She spoke calmly, as if she had rehearsed this conversation for weeks, but never wanted to have it. She said she had taken a photo from her car that night, not to trap them, but to remind herself she was not imagining things. Then she pulled out her phone and showed me. The image was grainy because she had taken it quickly, but the figure walking out of Landon's building was unmistakably Camille. She wore the same denim jacket she had later claimed she had misplaced that month. The timestamp on the picture matched the evening Camille told me she had visited her cousin. I closed my eyes because the weight of everything hit at once. The kitchen scene, the message, the drawer, the rushed excuses, the photo. They stacked together like a structure collapsing from the top down. Sloane placed her hand on my arm, not to comfort, but to anchor me to the ground. She said she had planned to confront Landon about it privately, but wanted to see how tonight unfolded first. I asked her if she had ever talked to Camille. She said Camille always avoided her when she tried. She said Camille never looked her in the eye for more than a second. She said everything added up once she saw my face when I walked out of the kitchen earlier. Before we stepped back toward the table, she warned me that Landon would lie because he always lied when cornered. She said he twisted things until everyone questioned their own memory of events. It was the reason she had never confronted him alone. She wanted another witness. When we returned to the table, everyone sensed something had shifted again. Camille kept twisting her napkin. Landon stared at Sloane, trying to read her. Some guests pretended to check their phones to avoid the tension. Sloane sat upright and calmly stated she had something to show Landon. Camille went rigid. Landon's confidence faltered. Before she even showed the photo, Camille whispered something under her breath and stood abruptly. She claimed she needed to step outside for air. Landon stood at the same time, insisting he would check on her. But Sloane blocked his path with a simple step sideways. She stared directly at him and asked why Camille had been at his apartment 3 weeks ago. Landon opened his mouth to answer, but no words came out. Everyone watched the moment unravel. I saw the panic build. I saw the lies scramble for formation. I saw the beginning of the collapse. And I knew this night was about to rip open the rest of the truth, whether they liked it or not. The room shifted the second Sloane asked him that question. It was like someone had opened a door to a freezing wind. Every ounce of warmth in the apartment drained out at once. Landon stood there with his jaw working back and forth as he tried to plant his expression into something neutral, but panic beat him to it. Camille stayed near the hallway, gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles whitened. No one spoke. No one moved. The tension built so fast that chairs creaked from people tightening their bodies. Landon finally cleared his throat, claiming the photo must have been taken out of context. But Sloane didn't let him ease into a comfortable explanation. She stepped forward and told him she wanted to hear the full story with every detail. She asked why Camille was at his apartment at a time she had told her fiancé she was visiting family. Landon tried spinning the narrative. He said Camille had been helping him sort out a personal problem. He spoke slowly, choosing each word like he was navigating a minefield. The more carefully he spoke, the more obvious it became that he was calculating every inch of the story, not recalling it. Camille kept shifting her weight, glancing at the door as if she wanted to run through it and disappear. I finally broke the silence. I asked why neither of them had mentioned any of this to me. I asked why they needed privacy during tonight's dinner if it was all innocent. I reminded them both that lies unravel quickly when too much pressure is applied. Camille swallowed hard and told me she had not wanted to upset me because it had been a one-time visit that meant nothing. Her voice shook, and she looked down at the floor instead of at me. People at the table watched as if they were trapped in a scene they never intended to witness. Someone whispered that maybe everyone should give us space, but no one actually stood up because the anticipation pulled them in. They wanted answers almost as much as I did, and none of them trusted Landon enough to leave him room to craft a story unchallenged. Sloane held up her phone and asked Landon one more time if he wanted to explain the photo. He stepped toward her, trying to take the phone, but she moved back. His expression twisted into frustration, and he finally said Camille had needed advice. He insisted Camille trusted him because of their long history. His voice grew louder as he spoke, like he believed volume could force the lie into a shape that resembled truth. Camille finally interrupted him. She said she had gone to talk about wedding stress. She claimed she had been overwhelmed and did not want to dump more pressure onto me. She insisted Landon had been the only person she could talk to because she didn't want to involve her family. Her voice cracked halfway, and she looked like she was rehearsing the lines while speaking them. The room stayed silent again until Sloane opened her mouth and dropped the next blow. She said she had more than a photo. She told Landon his entryway camera had sent notifications to her phone because she and Landon shared a home Wi-Fi network for years. She said the camera had synced when she downloaded an app to keep track of deliveries. She admitted she had forgotten to remove the device after their last argument. The footage had recorded Camille stepping into his apartment and staying for more than an hour. The words struck like a hammer. Camille froze. Landon glanced at Sloane with disbelief, then at me, then at Sloane again, trying to piece together a reaction that would get him out of the corner she had just thrown him into. His mouth hung open in a delayed attempt at outrage. He claimed Sloane was invading his privacy, but she didn't flinch. She said she didn't care about his privacy anymore. She wanted truth, not theatrics. I felt something sharp twist in my gut. I asked Camille directly what she and Landon discussed for an hour. She said they talked about life changes. She said she had been emotional that day. She said she needed support. The explanations hung in the air like loose threads. None of them could be braided into anything convincing. The guests looked at one another with expressions that mixed discomfort and morbid fascination. Sloane sat down and laid her phone on the table, not playing the footage yet, but letting its presence threaten both of them. She said she did not want to expose anyone unless absolutely necessary, but she refused to let lies continue. Landon's eyes darted to the hallway. Camille followed his gaze. It was subtle, but they both did it. And that single glance formed a connection between them they could no longer disguise. I asked them what that glance meant. Camille shook her head aggressively, saying nothing happened. Landon stepped forward, angry now, saying these questions were humiliating. He told me I was blowing everything out of proportion and creating a scene at a dinner that had nothing to do with any of this. I leaned in and told him the scene existed because he created it in the kitchen. His face reddened. He clenched his fists like he wanted to shout, but Sloane spoke before he could escalate. She told me to step onto the balcony for a moment because she had something she wanted to show me in private. Her tone was steady, and she looked determined. Landon panicked at the suggestion. He stepped toward us quickly, insisting that no one needed to see anything else. He said the footage was meaningless. He said the camera didn't capture anything incriminating. His reaction said otherwise. I followed Sloane to the balcony. The cool air hit my face like a wake-up call. She opened her phone and scrolled until she found a short clip. She handed it to me with no introduction and let the footage speak for itself. The video quality was clear enough to eliminate any benefit of doubt. Camille entered the apartment wearing the same jacket from the photo. Landon opened the door, already smiling. Camille stepped closer than a casual greeting required. The video didn't show anything explicit, but it didn't need to. The body language was enough. The familiarity, the lingering, the way Landon closed the door behind her with a slow gesture that looked practiced. My chest tightened so intensely it felt like my ribs were shrinking inward. The worst part wasn't the video. It was the memory of Camille telling me she had barely seen Landon that month. Every lie lined up neatly in my head, one after another, like a puzzle revealing itself after weeks of sitting unsolved. Sloane placed a hand on my shoulder. She didn't try to comfort me. She wasn't offering sympathy. She simply grounded me so that I wouldn't walk back into that dining room ready to tear the truth out of them by force. She whispered that she had suspected them for too long and that she felt guilty for not telling me earlier. She said she thought I deserved to know and that tonight gave her the evidence she needed to finally speak up. I thanked her quietly because it was the only thing I could offer. Gratitude felt strange in the middle of personal collapse, but she had handed me a truth I needed, even if it crushed something inside me. We returned to the dining room, and the moment Camille saw my face, she knew. She asked what Sloane had shown me. Her voice trembled as she took a step forward. I didn't answer. Landon stepped between us, claiming Sloane had twisted everything. He said footage could be misleading. He said people jumped to conclusions. I asked him if the footage was fake. He didn't answer. Camille reached out to touch my arm, but I stepped back. She looked devastated, but the devastation felt performative. It looked like she was scrambling to build a bridge while watching the water rise too fast beneath her. I told her the engagement was over. The silence that followed was heavy enough to push the air out of the room. She stumbled forward, insisting she could explain more. She begged me to talk to her outside. She said everything looked worse than it actually was. Her words tumbled over each other with desperation. Landon raised his voice and told her to stop apologizing. His reaction was strange enough to make every guest look at him instead of us. He didn't sound protective. He sounded territorial. Camille turned toward him with frustration boiling under her skin, and the two of them exchanged a look that gave away more than anything they had said that night. I walked to the door without another word. My chest felt tight and hollow at the same time, like the air didn't know how to move inside me. As I stepped outside, I heard Camille call my name. Then I heard Landon call hers. Then the sound of footsteps behind me. The night wasn't done tearing itself apart. The cool night air hit me the second I stepped outside, but it didn't clear my head. My heartbeat still pulsed in my throat. I kept walking toward my car, not because I had a destination, but because staying inside that apartment felt impossible. My mind replayed the footage over and over, each pass adding a weight I wasn't prepared for. I heard Camille's footsteps behind me, fast and uneven. She called out to me, but I didn't turn around. When her hand finally grabbed my arm near the driveway, I stopped but didn't face her. She tried to speak, but her breathing came in short, frantic bursts. She said everything looked worse than it was. She said she made mistakes in moments of weakness but never crossed a line. She said she cared about me and didn't want to lose what we built. Her words tumbled with desperation, as if rapid confession could beat the truth back into submission. I asked her why she needed to go to Landon in secret if it was so innocent. She said she felt judged by me when she brought up stress. She said Landon understood her because they shared history. She said she didn't think it would matter. Her sentences kept unraveling. Every explanation contradicted the last. She wrapped her arms around herself as if the cold were the enemy instead of her choices. Before I could respond, we both heard shouting from the street. Landon stormed out of the building, yelling at Sloane, who followed him with a firm, steady stride. They came toward us, arguing so loudly that neighbors would probably talk about it for days. Landon accused her of spying. Sloane told him secrecy didn't come free. Their anger filled the street like a flare that drew every eye. Sloane marched straight to Camille with the calm of someone who had held back too long. She said she wasn't angry at her, only tired of being treated like a person who wouldn't notice what was right in front of her. Camille tried to deny everything again, but Sloane cut her off. She said the hallway footage wasn't the only thing that bothered her. She pointed out the familiar glances between them for months. She listed the excuses, the last-minute changes, the unexplained errands. None of it was said with rage. It was said with resignation. Landon tried to pull Sloane away, but she refused to move. He raised his voice at her, not in a threatening way, but in that desperate tone people use when they know the lie has run out of room. When he stepped forward, some guests from the party had already wandered outside. They formed a small circle at the edge of the driveway, watching the unraveling play out under the streetlights. One of them whispered that they weren't surprised. Another shook their head with disappointment. The social collapse had begun. Camille shifted closer to me, insisting she never betrayed me physically. She said the emotional confusion wasn't an affair. She begged me to talk privately, away from the chaos. I told her she'd had months to talk privately with me, and she chose someone else. Her shoulders slumped as if the impact hit harder than she expected. She kept reaching toward me, but I kept stepping back until the space between us made her realize I wasn't returning. Landon kept shouting at Sloane, but she finally silenced him by raising her phone. She said she would send the footage to every friend still questioning her. She said she wasn't protecting his reputation anymore. Her voice didn't tremble. She wasn't bluffing. Landon froze, realizing he no longer held control. He grabbed at the phone, but she stepped back in time. The guests watching gasped when he lunged again, this time angrier. He didn't touch her, but the movement was aggressive enough to strip him of whatever social currency he still had left. One guest shouted at him to back off. Another stepped closer in case things escalated. Landon finally realized he had cornered himself and backed away, running a hand through his hair like he couldn't believe how quickly his life was collapsing. Sloane turned to him and said she was done, not in dramatic phrasing, not in a cliché, just a factual statement that marked the end of something brittle. She told him she was leaving that night. She told him he could explain everything to his friends without her involvement. She turned around and walked toward her car without waiting for his response. Camille became frantic. She begged me not to leave her like this. She asked me to at least consider talking after emotions settled. She held onto my arm with both hands as if her grip could anchor me. But the foundation had already cracked. The trust we had built was not something I could recover with a conversation. It wasn't something I could patch with promises. I pulled my arm from her grasp. She stumbled back, trembling. She asked if I believed she never crossed the physical line. I told her it didn't matter because she crossed 5 others that mattered just as much. The secrecy, the meetings, the private messages, the comfort she found in someone else while claiming to build a future with me. None of it could be undone. Landon ran a hand over his face and muttered that the whole night had gone too far. He tried to claim everyone was overreacting. He said things were exaggerated. He tried to regain control by downplaying everything. Sloane rolled down her car window and laughed bitterly as she backed out of the driveway. Her reaction alone showed how long she had waited for the truth to land. The guests began dispersing slowly, whispering as they went. Some patted my shoulder on the way out. Others avoided eye contact because they didn't know what to say. A few stayed back, unsure whether Camille needed help or space. She sank onto the steps of the building and covered her face with her hands. I didn't move toward her. I couldn't. The distance felt necessary. When I finally walked to my car, Camille called after me one more time. Her voice cracked, not in theatrical despair, but in genuine disbelief that the future she assumed was guaranteed had shattered. She said she didn't know how to face the consequences alone. I didn't answer. I opened the car door and sat inside. I watched Landon pacing near the sidewalk, trying to come up with explanations he could use later. His posture looked defeated, but not because he lost me as a friend. He lost the control he used to keep everyone orbiting around him. I drove home slowly because my mind was too loud for speed. When I reached my apartment, I turned off my phone and sat in silence. The night replayed itself in pieces, each one heavier than the last. The footage, the message, the kitchen, the look between them. Every detail connected more cleanly than any excuse. The next morning brought consequences that kept unfolding. Sloane sent the footage to the group chat. She wrote that she hoped no one doubted her anymore. The reaction was immediate. People unfollowed Landon on social media. A few sent angry messages. One mutual friend removed him from a group event he had organized. Camille reached out to several people trying to control the narrative, but the footage made it impossible. She messaged me 3 times asking if we could talk in person. She said she respected my decision but wanted to explain more. I didn't respond. I called the venue that morning and canceled the wedding deposit. They charged a fee, but it felt like the price of peace. By the end of the week, the fallout was complete. Landon's friend circle fractured. Sloane moved out of their shared place and stayed with a coworker. Camille left social gatherings entirely for a while because everyone treated her differently. I blocked her number after the final message saying she hoped to someday rebuild trust. I didn't hold anger by then, just clarity. The truth had done its work, and my life continued without the weight of people who couldn't carry their share of honesty.